بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. Today, inshallah, we'll continue on with the Tafseer of Surah Al-Baqara as we stopped last time to Ayah 248. And today, inshallah, we'll continue on with Ayah number 249, which was talking about the story of Talut. And this is the king that been appointed by the Prophet of Bani Israel, who's been selected and appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be their king. And as we remember last time, the family, the tribe of Bani Israel, they did not accept it at the beginning because he was not from the elite families, he was not from the tribal, the rich, the elite, the leaders, and they said he has no power, no money, he has no family. And the Prophet told them, this is the selection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you have to accept it. And he has a sign, an evidence that he was selected by Allah, which is that Allah promised them, or the Prophet promised them, that he will bring the tabut, the box of Bani Israel, of Musa alayhi salam, and the remnant of Harun and Musa and what he has left. So eventually they accepted him because he has the sign that he is the appointed king to Bani Israel. Today, inshallah, we'll continue on with the same story of Talut and the battle that happened between Talut and Jalut, that tyrant, big, giant tribe that were like living in Palestine. So the ayah starts, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فلما فصل طالوت بالجنود قال إن الله مبتليكم بنهر فمن شرب منه فليس مني ومن لم يطعمه فإنه مني إلا من اغترف غرفة بيده فشربوا منه إلا قليلا منهم فلما جاوزه هو والذين آمنوا معه قالوا لا طاقة لنا اليوم بجالوت وجنوده قال الذين يظنون أنهم ملاقو الله كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة بإذن الله والله مع الصابرين. When Saul, or Talut, as in Arabic called, his name is Talut. When Talut marched forth with his army, he cautioned, Allah will test you with a river. So whoever drinks his full from it, it is not with me. And whoever does not taste it except a sip from the hollow of his hand is definitely with me. They all drank except few of them. When he and remaining faithful with him crossed the river, they said, now we are no match to Goliath, which is Jalut, and his warriors. But those who believe, who were certain they would meet Allah, said, how many times has a small force defeated a mighty army by the will of Allah, and Allah is always with the steadfast. So here, as Talut been assigned and appointed as a king, he told him, now we are going to fight Bani Israel. And this is a command from Allah. He is going to fight the people who were living in Palestine, which is Jalut and his army. And this army and this tribe of Jalut, they were known as a giant people, big people, very powerful, and it's like huge numbers as well. So before they marched to the battlefield or to the fight, Allah wanted to test this group with Talut, with the king. Allah wanted to test them. And this is the ayah, it says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ مُبْتَلِيكُم بِنَهَرٍ. Allah is testing you with this river. Now, what is the test? The test is basically to see who will follow the command of Allah and who will not. This is the test. It's all about whoever accepting the command of Allah or not. It's not a hard test, even though we know the army who are going through the river, they are thirsty, they wanted some water, they want to drink, right? But that's not very hard to disobey. It's very easy to obey the Prophet or to obey the orders of the king. But Allah wanted to test who are the ones who listen and follow and obey and who are not. So he told them, when you go through the river, do not drink from that river. And the ayah says, فَمَنْ شَرِبَ مِنْهُ. Do not drink directly from the river. And the drinking directly, by the way, it's like drink with your mouth from the river. That's what was not prohibited for them. And he said, the ones who are really believe will not drink at all. And the ones who just take a sip with their hand, he said, the ayah says that it's acceptable. Even though they're not the best believers, but that's acceptable by Allah, if they take a sip with their hand. So the army, they said, he has a big army, Talut. The king Talut has a big army. When they marched and went through the Nahar. The Nahar, by the way, this is Jordan River. It's a river between Jordan and Palestine. It's the same Jordan River that we know today. And that's what most of the scholars say. This river is Nahar al-Urdun. It is the Jordan River. So they pass through it. Most of them, they actually drink from that river. That means they disobey the orders of the king. Except a few of them. Those few of them, they said, they were about 4,000 people who passed the river without drinking from that river. They were 4,000. When they faced the army of Jalut at that moment, when they passed the river, those 4,000, which supposed to be the best ones with the king, they are the best ones as the best believers, right? Because they passed the exam, they passed the test. When they faced and saw the army of Jalut, or Goliath, they call them Goliath in English. When they saw a huge army, they said that army was in thousands and thousands. Now the numbers are different. I mean, if you look at the Tafseer, the numbers will go from like 40,000 to 100,000. But in general, they were so many army, like fighters, warriors, and they were also giants. And that's like a huge challenge. So when those 4,000 saw the army of Jalut, they said, we لا طاقة لنا اليوم بجالوت وجنوده. We cannot fight this big army. This is like over and beyond our capability. Most of the army with Talut, they actually left and retrieved and they went back. So how many people left with Talut? They're saying there left only 300 and few people. And actually the Sahaba, one of the Sahaba said, Al-Bara ibn Azib, he said, the number of the people with Talut is the same number that we were in the Battle of Badr. 300 and few people, 320, 340. It's the same number that the Sahaba with the Prophet ﷺ fight in the Battle of Badr. So here, look at the link between the believers. Even the history, look how far is that history from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, but they know the story of Jalut. So when they were in the Battle of Badr, they remember the same number. They said, this is exactly the same number as Talut has with him when he fought Jalut and his army. So this is the second time Allah commanded Bani Israel to go to Palestine. First time was with Musa alayhi salam. If you remember the story of Musa when he ordered them to go to Palestine, and what they said to Musa alayhi salam, they said, اذهب أنت وربك فقاتلا إنا هنا قاعدون. Go fight with your Lord, we are sitting here. That's with Musa alayhi salam. Now, with this king, with Talut and the prophet of Bani Israel, what they said, even those 4,000 believers, not all of them follow and march with Talut. Only 300 of them, 300, which is the best of the best believers, who actually were tested. They passed the river, they passed the test of the river, and when they saw Jalut and his big army, what they say? They said here, this is the next and the continuation of the ayah. قال الذين يظنون أنهم ملاقو الله. Those are the believers. Now here the ayah says قال الذين يظنون أنهم ملاقو الله. The ones who think that they will face the command and see the command and the orders and the promise of Allah. And meaning, these are the ones who believe. يظنون here means they certainly believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't mean that they have shaky iman or hesitant belief. No, they have a very strong belief. So the ayah says those small group, again, this very small group, 300 some people, they said, those are the ones who are believing in Allah commands and order. They said, كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة بإذن الله. Now look at this ayah. This ayah is like a qanun. It's like a law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is something Allah put as one of His laws, as we call, or rules, as we call it in Arabic, the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This ayah, like how many times a small group of believers will defeat a huge and big armies by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the end of the ayah says, Wallahu ma'as sabirin. Allah is with the patient, with the ones who are steadfasting on the belief, on the iman. Now this ayah, again, this is like a keystone, like a foundation, like one of the core foundation of the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the laws of Allah in the history, and this law will continue on as the believers always defeat the disbelievers with some conditions, which is the strong belief and the patience. The strong belief and the patient. And this, by the way, it's repeated over and over and over. It happens in the Battle of Badr. And we know the story of Badr, everyone, we know how the mu'mineen, the believers, the small group of believers with the Prophet ﷺ defeated a big army of Quraysh. And they were not even ready for fight. If you remember the Battle of Badr, they were not going to fight, right? They were going to raid the caravan of Abu Sufyan. And the Prophet ﷺ asked him, like, who wants to fight, who wants to be with me? Then eventually end up with 300 people, 300 some people fighting with him. But they were able to defeat an army of Quraysh, 1,000 people, right? With many, like hundreds of camels, with 70 horses, with a big armor. They have a very well prepared army with Abu Jahl, right? The believers with the Prophet ﷺ, they have one horse or two horses, right? They have 70 camels, and most of them they were walking on their foot. However, the battle was a huge victory to the believers, right? So that's one example of the small group defeat the bigger group by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be steadfasting and following the commands of Allah. This example has been repeated many times. I'll give some examples of those battles that the believers, the mu'mineen, were able to defeat the big groups. Like, for example, Ma'arakat al-Yamama. If you remember Ma'arakat al-Yamama, the Battle of Yamama. This battle happened after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, and during the Hurub al-Ridda, the apostate wars that happened after or during the time of Abu Bakr. Khalid bin Walid was leading this battle. Khalid bin Walid in this battle has 12,000 people, 12,000 fighters. The people of Musaylam al-Kadhab, which is, he was sitting in the Yamama, the city called Yamama, which is his tribe. He has, they're saying, between 40 to 60,000 people. Khalid bin Walid has 12,000 people, even though the believers were able to win that battle with a small group. Ratio is like 1 to what? 1 to 5, right? It's something like that, 1 to 5. But what weapons they have, what is the strongest weapon they have in their hand is the belief, right? And the steadfasting, the patience. Another battle, Khalid bin Walid in the Persian area, when the Muslimin conquered the land of Persia, within 1 year, Khalid bin Walid, he fought 15 battles Always his groups are much, much smaller than the Persian groups and the Persian army. And every time in 15 battles, Khalid was able to win the fight, to win the battle. By what? Again, by the belief, by the steadfasting, by being on the right path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because these are the conditions of the victory. And we'll talk about those conditions in a minute. Another battle happens. There is a battle called Tustur. This also happened in Persia during the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Khalid Murid has 30,000 fighters. The Persian, they have 150,000 fighters. Who won the battle? Also the believers. The Muslimin, they won that battle. There's another battle called Nahawand. Nahawand, same thing. The Muslimin, they have 30,000. The Persian, they have 150,000. The Muslimin were able to win that battle again. Ma'arakat al-Yarmouk. We all know Ma'arakat al-Yarmouk. 25,000 with the Muslimin in Bilad al-Sham versus 280,000 people of the Romans, right? 250,000 against 25,000. The Muslimin were able to win. They won the battle also in Ma'arakat al-Yarmouk, and we know the results of Ma'arakat al-Yarmouk. Ma'arakat Fath al-Andalus, the conquer of Andalus, which is Spain today. The Muslimin, when they were in that area, when they entered the Andalus, or they call it Andalusia, 12,000 people. The army of the Muslimin, 12,000 people. The army of the Roman or the Spanian in that area, 100,000 people. 100,000 people versus 12,000. And the Muslims, they defeated this huge army. They wiped them out completely. By what? Not by the arms, the weapons, the military forces that they have. The main thing they have in their hand is the iman, the belief, and the steadfasting. And those are the very main two conditions that you need to win a battle. Without those conditions, you will never win. So the conditions, what's the meaning of conditions here? Condition means that you have to have this condition in order to get the result, right? You have to have a certain condition in order to get the result. Now you might have the faith and the steadfasting, but you don't win. Why? Why is that could happen? Because the victory is only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is not from you. It is not from the humans. It is not based on what you have preparation. Always the victory from Allah. Always. But Allah made a condition. He said, "In tansurullaha yansurukum." If you support Allah, Allah will support you. If that means if you support and meaning that you believe and you steadfast, Allah may give you the victory, right? But victory will never been given to you without these conditions. We have to understand the meaning of conditions of the victory. Condition means that you have to prepare, you have to have it in hands before you go to the battle. I'll give example for conditions. For a car, in order to start your car, you have to have requirements, right? Let's call the conditions like requirements. You have to have gas in the car, right? You have to have battery, you have to have power, right? And you have to have a good engine, right? That could start. Now you might have all of these, but the car doesn't start. But is there any way in the world the car would start with no gas? No way. We're talking about the general gas engine, right? We're not talking about other stuff. If you have no power, no battery in your car, keep like knocking the engine many times, it's not going to start, right? Because these are what? The conditions. Conditions means that they must be there in order to get the result. But it doesn't mean if you have them that you will get the result. Again, the belief and the steadfasting are conditions for the nasr. You have to have them in order to be winning in the battle. But you might have them, right? And you don't win. And you don't get the results. Why? Because you might have done something wrong. We'll give example for the time for the Ma'rakat Uhud, for example. The Ma'rakat Uhud, the believers, they all good believers. They're Sahaba with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And they were steadfasting and they were believing in Allah. But they did not win. Why? Because they break some of the requirements. They what? They did what? They disobey the commands of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One time, Khalid bin Walid was going to meet an army, right? In the night, he was checking on his army and his people. All of the people, all of his fighters were standing in night praying and doing dua for Allah to give him victory, right? So that's a sign of the belief, right? Sign of the steadfasting. One tent, they were sleeping. And then what Khalid said? Exactly. He said, if we get defeated, we will be defeated from this tent, right? Why? Because he realized that, oh, there is a problem. There is a problem in the conditions. That means my condition or our conditions are not complete, are not fulfilled. So that means we might not win that battle because we have not fulfilled all the conditions for the victory. So this is very important, that back to the law that mentioned in this ayah, how many small group defeated a huge armies by the will of Allah, right? When they believe the condition, كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة بإذن الله والله مع الصابرين. Always Allah will support those steadfasting and believers. So this is, again, this is a law, this is a rule, this is, see how there are rules Allah made in this universe, many rules, right? Even physical rules that we can sense them. Like one of the rules, for example, the wood will float on the water. This is a rule from Allah, right? The iron will sink in the water. This is a law also from Allah, made by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now there is also another type of rules, another type of laws Allah made in this life for us to teach us that in order to win a battle, you have to have those conditions for that battle. And Allah is the only one who will give the victory. Allah is the only one who will allow and support and give the victory to the ones that He see that they deserve to be winning. So this is a very important rule that we should all understand, and inshallah we'll add up to this very quickly to link it to our reality today. We see the Muslims today are weak, right? They're very weak, they're defeated, they don't have power, they don't have arms. Look, but they can win. They can win the battle. They can win and be victorious if they make those conditions of Allah that He put as a requirement. The people of Gaza are example for us, right? The people of Gaza are a very small group, very weak. Their arms and weapons are very limited, right? They were fighting the biggest army in the Middle East, right? Supported by the biggest army in the world, and they were able to stand for that power. By what? We all know they were able to stand by the belief in Allah and the steadfasting, right? And being on the right path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that means this law could happen and repeat itself over and over, and it will be repeated. So that means don't look at the power of the superpowers today that you will see, oh, we are weak, we're Muslims, we are weak, we cannot do anything. Who can defeat this superpower, super powerful, high technology? Don't look at it this way, because the victory is only given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not given by the strength and the power that you have in your hand. It is only has these two conditions to make you win. So this is like a lesson for us. Allah given it to us in this ayah, and He's summarizing the story of Talut that we learn from that story. This is a teaching for us, because the sunnah of Allah will continue until the end of the life. So this is a lesson for us that we should always keep in our mind, inshallah. Then the next ayah says, وَلَمَّا بَرَزُوا لِجَالُودَ وَجُنُودِهِ قالوا ربنا افرغ علينا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. When they advanced to face Goliath, which is Jalut, and his warriors, they prayed, Our Lord, shower us with patience, make our steps firm, and give us victory over disbelievers. So when those people who believe with Talut, the very good and very well selected believers, right, were tested and passed the exam and the test, when they saw the people of Jalut, the huge army of Jalut, they did not defeat, they did not retrieve, they did not get weakened. What they said, what they do, they immediately start praying for Allah. They said, رَبَّنَا افْرِغْ عَلَيْنَا صَبْرًا وَثَبِّتْ أَقْدَامَنَا. May Allah make us patient, steadfasting, and strong. Because what? They know that the victory is from Allah. So the only one they go back to and call and pray for is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why when they saw this huge army, they immediately prayed to Allah to give him victory. If you remember in battle of Ma'rakat al-Yarmouk, when one of the Sahaba, one of the Muslims, saw the army of the Romans, of the Byzantine, right? This is the Romans at that time. 280,000. You know, when the Muslims 25,000 versus 250,000, they were spread covering like the mountains. 250, 280,000, it's a huge number. I mean, if you look at them today, if you see 250 people gathering somewhere, it's a scary number, right? So that Muslim, when he saw the numbers, when he saw them in front of his eyes, what he said? He said, ما أكثر الروم وما أقل المسلمين. Oh, look how big, how many are the Romans and how small are the Muslimin. What Khalid said. What did he do? Khalid hit him in his chest and he said, like hush or be silent. Don't think that way. He said, no. But what is the biggest number? What is the bigger number of the Muslimin and the smaller of the kuffar? Why? And he said, because إنما الغلبة بالنصر. The strength, the power by the faith and the victory. It's not by numbers. No, numbers are always meaningless. In the battles, numbers doesn't mean anything. What really means something or means everything is the belief and the steadfasting. This is reality. This is reality, and this is how the Muslims always see that as a fact. Numbers doesn't mean anything. This is what means something, what means everything. Because what? Because Allah is with you. Imagine the power of Allah is with you, supporting you and backing you up in the battle. And that's why always the believers, always winning the victory, winning the battles with the disbelievers. And then the next ayah says, فَهَزَمُوهُمْ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ وَقَتَلَ دَاوُودُ جَالُوتَ وَأَتَاهُ اللَّهُ الْمُلْكَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَعَلَّمَهُ مِمَّا يَشَاءُ ولولا دفع الله الناس بعضهم ببعض لفسدت الأرض ولكن الله ذو فضل على العالمين. So they defeated them by Allah's will, and David killed Goliath, Dawood killed Jalut, and Allah blessed David with kingship and wisdom and taught him what he willed. Had Allah not repelled a group of people by another, corruption would have dominated the earth, but Allah is gracious to all. So look at this ayah. Now this ayah mentioned Dawood alayhi salam for the first time, right? Or the story, it never talk about Dawood. This is the first time that bring up the name of Dawood alayhi salam. Now Dawood, he was from Bani Israel, and he was among that army of Talut. Dawood alayhi salam, at that time he was a young man, 16, 17 years old, okay? Young, powerful, strong, they were saying the way that he looks like, they said he was short, he has blue eyes, handsome man, very strong, very powerful. And we know Dawood alayhi salam, he was a shepherd. And if you remember the hadith of Prophet alayhi salam, he said, ما من نبي إلا ورعى الغنم. All the prophets, they were shepherds, right? Why? Because this is a teaching for the prophets on how to lead the ummah, to lead their people, right? Shepherd is the best position, or best job that will teach you how to lead and how to control, right? So now here it says Dawood alayhi salam, he was in that army. Talut, the king, when you know the battles in the old days, what they used to do in the battles, they used to have like two people, or the strongest two people facing each other, right? So one of this army, another one versus another strong, powerful man of that army. So from Jalut's army, Jalut was challenging the army of Talut, right? So now Talut asked his people who would go and fight. When they saw this big number, and they saw Jalut was a giant person, very huge. The whole tribe of Jalut were giant, but Jalut himself was the most powerful of them. And he was big, giant, strong, powerful man. When they saw him, no one even think to go and fight with him. No one even look at this chance to fight him. Then what Talut said, the king of Bani Israel, he said, anyone fight this man and kill him, I will marry him to my daughter and he will be a king after me. So imagine this reward that he's given. So he's encouraging them to go and fight this man, because if you defeat Jalut, that's it. It's like the end of the battle. Who came up? It happened to be that Dawood alayhi salam. Dawood, young man, short, right? He's not a warrior, he's a shepherd. But he has a very good skills. You know, shepherd, what they do? They use the slingshot. If you know the slingshot, right? They use it to control their sheep, right? Dawood alayhi salam was very powerful, very very skillful in this skills. So he went to fight and face Jalut. Jalut told him, "Hey, young man, I don't like to kill you. Like you're young, you're nothing. You're like a short, small, young, like you are." He said, "Go back. I don't want to fight you. Get me someone else." What Dawood alayhi salam said? He said, "No, but I would like to kill you." And they start fighting. Dawood alayhi salam, as we said, was a very skillful person with his slingshot, and that's one of the narrations. I mean, it could be other narrations, but this is most of the narration. They said he was using a slingshot. And he actually was able to hit him by the forehead. And he immediately killed him on the spot. After that, the whole army defeated. So that was the end of the battle. They defeated this huge big army by Dawood alayhi salam. Now this is, of course, the king. He fulfilled his promise to Dawood alayhi salam, and he married him to his daughter, and actually he became a king after Talut. This is how Dawood alayhi salam became the king and the prophet of Bani Israel after this battle. So in the ayah says, وَقَتَلَ دَاوُودُ جَالُوتَ وَآتَاهُ اللَّهُ الْمُلْكَ. Now this is after he became the king. وَآتَاهُ اللَّهُ الْمُلْكَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَعَلَّمَهُ مِمَّا يَشَاءُ. Now what Allah has given Dawood alayhi salam, Allah blessed Dawood alayhi salam with many blessings and ni'am from him, based on this ayah, that Allah gave him the knowledge, the ilm, and He gave him the wisdom, the hikmah, right? And He gave him from everything. And it says, وَعَلَّمَهُ مِمَّا يَشَاءُ. And Allah gave him from whatever He wants to give him, whatever Allah wants to give him. So they're saying Allah, number one, Allah has taught him صنعة لبوس. The ayah says, وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ صنعة لبوس. What is صنعة لبوس? That's an ayah in other surah. This is in Surah Al-Anbiya. صنعة لبوس is like making the arm, making the shield, and making weapons, and making swords, and making the armors. This was given to Dawood alayhi salam by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So imagine like if you go to learn something, right? Learn a skill, or learn something, you would go to a professional person, right, in his profession. He will teach you very nice, good skills. If you want to be a construction man, he will give you good techniques, right? Great techniques on how to be a very good construction person, for example. Now imagine the one who's teaching you who? In this ayah, it says Allah is the one who taught Dawood alayhi salam this profession. And he said, وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ صَنْعَةَ لَبُوسٍ. We, Allah says subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's the one who taught Dawood alayhi salam this skill, this profession. So Dawood alayhi salam was the best one to make the armors and shields and the weapons in that time, right? Another thing Allah gave to Dawood alayhi salam said in Surah Saba, وَأَلَنَّا لَهُ الْحَدِيدِ. Actually in the same ayah mentioned, it says, وَأَلَنَّا لَهُ الْحَدِيدِ. What is أَلَنَّا لَهُ الْحَدِيدِ? It's like we make the iron very soft in his hand. So imagine if you ever play with the clay, right? How the clay like very soft, and the kids playing with the clay, very nice and soft. Imagine Dawood alayhi salam, Allah made the iron like a clay in his hand. So that means he could make whatever he wants in the iron, using the iron. This is something Allah gave it to Dawood alayhi salam. And that's something very special and very unique, was never given to anyone before him. Another thing Allah gave to Dawood alayhi salam, very special thing. The ayah says in Surah An-Naml, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ عُلِّمْنَا مَنْطِقَ الطَّيْرِ. Dawood alayhi salam was also, Allah taught him how to understand the language of the birds, right? And if you remember, like he was commanding the birds as well, right? So Dawood alayhi salam was given this new knowledge that he will understand and learn what the birds are communicating. Now, what is that language and how does he understand it? Allah knows. We don't know exactly what kind of language that they're communicating, but that means birds, they do have a language. They have a communication language. And we don't know exactly how does that language work, but Allah has gave it to Dawood alayhi salam. Another thing Allah given Dawood alayhi salam is what? Is the Zabur, which is the book, right? The book that he revealed to Dawood alayhi salam, which is the knowledge and the shari', the path, the teaching of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And the knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's another thing also been given to Dawood alayhi salam. So that's all under the knowledge, the wisdom, and the ilm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One last thing also, one of the great blessing Allah gave Dawood alayhi salam is the very nice voice, right? And you remember this ayah that says, يا جبال أوبي معه الطير. يا جبال أوبي معه والطير. أوبي, Allah is commanding the mountains and the birds to do tasbih. أوبي means tasbih. Now Dawood alayhi salam, Allah gave him a very, very nice voice, probably the best voice ever that you will ever hear. And if you remember the story when Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, one of the Sahaba, was reading the Quran, right? Reciting the Quran. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari has a very nice voice. One day he was reading and leading the Salah. The Prophet ﷺ was listening to him. And the Prophet liked his voice so much. And he told him, لَقَدْ أُوتِيتَ مِزْمَارًا مِنْ مَزَامِيرِ آلِ دَاوُود. Allah has given you a mizmar of a mazamir that been given to Dawood. Mizmar means here, it doesn't mean the flute, because mizmar in Arabic means a flute, but it doesn't mean a flute. It means Allah given you a very nice voice, something of what Allah has given to Dawood. So imagine the Prophet ﷺ like the voice of Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, right? And he has a very nice voice. And the Prophet told him, you have been given something of what Dawood has been given. So Dawood ﷺ, when he was praying, when he was doing his tasbih, imagine the mountains and the birds were repeating after him, and they were all united, cohering together, they repeating this tasbih in a very nice voice. So that's something given to Dawood alayhi salam as another unique thing that Allah specially gave it to him. And then the end of this ayah, there is another, I would say, another law that Allah put in the end of this ayah. The ayah says, or the end of that ayah says, وَلَوْلَا. Now this is coming after what? As we said, after Allah said, وَآتَاهُ اللَّهُ الْمُلْكَ وَعَلَّمَهُ مِمَّا يَشَاءُ ولولا دفع الله الناس بعضهم ببعض لفسدت الأرض. This law is another law as Allah made it to us, which is the tadafu. ولولا دفع الله الناس بعضهم ببعض. If it's only for let's get to the right translation here, because it says, had Allah not repelled a group of people by another, corruption would have dominated the earth, but Allah is gracious to all. So that means because of the fight between the truth and the false, because of this fight between the truth and the false, the earth will be destroyed, the earth will be corrupted. So this is sunnah, this is a way, this is a law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there always will be a struggle and a fight between the truth and the false, the truthful people and the falsehood people, between the people on the right path and the people on the wrong path. This is always happening from the time of Adam alayhi salam until the end of the life. This is a law. Allah has made it and it will continue on. And what we are seeing today, a fight and struggle between the believers and the disbelievers, this is part of the struggle that Allah has put as a law, because this is how Allah balance and maintain this earth, by the good people fighting the bad people. And this doesn't change. As we see, like that Allah has made that in this ayah. It's not only he is telling us that this is his law, no, but he's requesting and commanding the believer that the believers will have to fight and struggle with the disbeliever, and have to struggle with the falsehood. They have to. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ says, "Al-Islam was-Sultan akhawani taw'aman." So the Islam and the authority are like a twin. So that means Islam or Iman without authority doesn't mean anything, right? Islam, Iman, and the right path without authority, without power, it doesn't mean anything. There is nothing, no way that it will lead without the power, right? So if you remember the ayah that says, وَأَنزَلْنَا الْحَدِيدَ فِيهِ بَأْسٌ شَدِيد, right? So when Allah mentioned that in this ayah, that means that the power has always to be with the side of the right path, because right thing and right path without power, without authority, it's like meaningless, right? Someone who, let's say, calling the people for the right thing and keep calling and calling and calling, ask them and making conferences, but without power, you cannot apply, you cannot implement anything. You need to have the power in your hand, and that's what the Prophet ﷺ was doing. He was seeking to get and gain the power. After he get that, he was able to implement the path and the right way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, right path without power doesn't get you anywhere, and it doesn't mean anything. And as all of the scholars says, you as a believer, you cannot be neutral between the right and wrong. Muslim believers, they cannot be neutral. You cannot say, oh, I'm neutral, I cannot be on this side or that side. I am in the middle. You can't. If you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and follow His command and follow His right path, you have to take a side. You have to support and be with the right side, with the right path. You cannot be on the neutral side. You can't. This is based on this ayah. It is a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to us to be on the right path. One last thing I would say, and we'll conclude. Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu said, عندما سكت أهل الحق عن الباطل ظن أهل الباطل أنهم على حق. When the right people, the people on the right path, they were silent and quiet and not saying anything against the wrong people, the falsehood people, then the falsehood people think that they are right. Why? Because if you don't tell someone who's doing wrong, if you don't tell him this is wrong, he will think that you are wrong. So imagine they will exceed their limit and they will attack you, and they're thinking that you are wrong now. So you have to tell them that you are wrong, and this is wrong, and this is the right path. If you remember those